Welcome, everyone. My name is Walter Schlecht. I'm the subject librarian for comparative literature at Washington University Libraries. I'm here to go over a few technical details before the main event starts. This is the webinar format of Zoom, so your videos and microphones are disabled. We're not doing a Q&A in this event, but we will have a reception afterward at 8 o'clock if you're interested in joining that and asking questions of our discussants. I will put the link in the chat. And then I will also share that, one moment. And I will also share that via email to registered attendees. You can request ghost letters from our library or from Subterranean Books on the Delmar Loop or another independent bookstore near you. And then I'd also like to let everyone know about our next event with translator Olivia Lott on March 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. She'll discuss her translation of Lucia Estrada's Catabasis, which actually just was shortlisted for the PEN Translation Prize in Poetry, which is really incredible. And I will put the link in the chat. But without further ado, we'll start the event, and Matthias will introduce our poet and discussant.
Thank you so much, Walt. Good evening. Welcome and welcome back for this event of the second season of the International Writers Series, a new collaboration between the International Writers track of the program in Comparative Literature and the university libraries to celebrate new publications of creative works by writers and translators in our community at Washington University in St. Louis. Our two guests are remarkable and unique as the book we are going to talk about this evening. Baba Badji is a Senegalese-American poet, translator, researcher, and PhD candidate in comparative literature at Washington University in St. Louis. He came to America when he was 11 years old. He currently lives in St. Louis, but, as Baba likes to describe it, his permanent home is Senegal, where his extended family remains, and his adopted home is New York City. Baba's first collection of poems, Ghost Letters, was published just a couple of weeks ago by Parlor Press. Ghost Letters, the haunting title of the collection, points to the epistolary form of many of Baba's poems. These poems are filled with real and imaginary landscapes. They are written partly in French, partly in Wolof, Senegal's most widely spoken language, and predominantly in English. This technique not only reflects the poet's multilinguistic background, but it opens the reader's mind to historical, cultural, racial, and personal traumas that inform what it means to be Senegalese, American, and Black. The mix of languages invokes the ties of Black people across the Black diaspora. Quote, "I'm trying to recover from stings poisoning my tongue," Baba writes. "I'm trying to recover from a disease whitening my black skin." And in another line, "There is no hymn, just history, history." Baba infuses his poetry with the voice and presence of a ghost mother who haunts his verses. Not unlike Emily Dickinson's letters, his poems become means of mind travel. Memories of Senegal, Baba's identity as Senegalese, American, and Black, themes of violence, clashes of culture, exile, history, and African myth are woven together in Ghost Letters to become what Mary Jo Bang calls a, quote, surrealist landscape, blurred beginnings, sorrowful endings, archetypes tangled in the roots of trees, where everything is held together by a speaker whose reading letters culled from a just-opened time capsule. You can indeed read Baba's poems as a, quote, 21st century notebook of a return to the native land, though it is a notebook of arrival and being in America, as Shane McCrae points out, or as, quote, a rare achievement whose formal complexity demonstrates not only the poet's remarkable technical skills, but survival skills as well, as Timothy Donnelly puts it. A long lost motherland and yet no home, a feeling of always being haunted by echoes of the past and always in between. Baba's poetry is bold. It seeks to understand the unacceptable mechanisms we are part of without having been able to choose them. It is a daring journey into the overlapping traumas of family story and Black history, a mesmerizing read. But before we take a closer look, let me first briefly introduce our second guest. Baba Badji will be joined in conversation by Dillon Brown, Associate Professor of English. Professor Brown's research and teaching interests center in post-colonial literature and theory, with a particular focus on the English-speaking Caribbean. His first book, Migrant Modernism, Post-War London and the West Indian Novel, University of Virginia Press, 2013, traces the interrelations between post-war West Indian novels and the British modernist tradition. His essays and reviews have been published in a variety of places, including Contemporary Literature, Modern Fiction Studies, and the Journal of West Indian Literature. He's currently working on a collection co-edited with Leah Rosenberg, Beyond Windrush, Rethinking Post-War West Indian Literature, forthcoming with the University of Missouri Press, as well as a book that examines the multifarious role the United States has played in the cultural and political imagination of the Caribbean. I would like to thank Washington University's library for making these events possible, as well as the Committee on Comparative Literature and simply all other departments of arts and sciences and numerous individuals who are involved. I want, furthermore, take a moment to express my special thanks and deepest gratitude to our amazing subject librarian Walter Slecht, who is my partner in crime in setting up the International Writers Series. He is currently, as you've seen, overseeing all the technical stuff of our webinar. But there are ghost letters to be read this evening. So let's give Baba Badji and Dillon Brown a big round of virtual applause. Enjoy the conversation and the readings from Baba's wonderful first poetry collection during the next 60 minutes.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Washington University in St. Louis. So the first poem I'm going to read, it's called Grandma's Timber Jug. Grandma's timber jug, we have gone fragile as spider's foot. Don't let us die out without ghost mothers. We drown in daring and nebulous deluge. How pleasant to see our hearts puff with the melancholic. We slug up the stranger's fear of us, inch by inch, on flagged earth. From a habit, a good habit, to clutch our nightmares. Très bien, une histoire quitte l'Afrique, esprit colonialiste. Bilay Wallah, it is said Allah taught about the jug. Mango leaf, Kankoran mask, hut sketch in cassava leaves, palm oil and mud. A jug stubborn borders, its black, silver, an identity of wounds. I remember only what my grandmother, Nana Fall, said of a jug. Nana Fall wishes that she never wants to be fed through tubes, that she's afraid to be pierced with a needle by a nurse from America who knows not to speak Wolof. Exile stung our raw and distant hearts. Who wants to join me to wash Nana Fall's soul? It will be fitting in heaven to reclaim her mulatto of foreign birth, body, and her restrained ghosts. Wounds droop over my tongue, watery pink, Senegalese green, American grace. First, my grandmother's timber jug became part of a routine nightmare, a trauma of a seafarer's endurance, a slave burned black, cultures hidden in my palm, exile bleeding in my body. In Senegal for a visit, my mouth full of bees, thick in doubt. I pull in front of Nana Fall's veranda, tormented and stuck in her timber chair. She waves her prayer beads. She feeds owls, ants, and vultures. In my American accent, I search origins of her illness. My grandmother knows how to track our domestic snake and the termites at dusk. But I'm convinced that a hidden illness, not the virus, is eating her away from us. The next poem I'll read, it's one of the letters. This is called Dear You Yawn. It is said one Togolese student was unable to find a place to stay when he was evicted. You said I must kiss a Jesus cross. It is said university shut down campus housing. Ah, I forgot. He took to sleeping under a bridge until he was chased away by police. What kind of angel must I kiss? You said blue LED screens have formed small portals into violence, beauty, tragedy, and nonsense. Of course, my God, it is said a Nigerian student was given just hours to evacuate his home. You said to kiss an angel dying a black death. El Dorado, Damolin Jepi. Kerosene lamps fell when Imam called off the gods. That day, there was a Quranic recital at dusk. I need a voice. I need Suratul Balad and Suratul Falak and a new dream, being choked from static aches. Here, aches are being emptied from my body. Mënuloo tous dañuy bët say frontière. I know who I have been, abal ma gent ya boy, dama leen jaaxal. I read The Shadow of the Pope in French and in Wolof, Jesus letters in the church, Jesus milk from the village shrine, mud and voodoo in me. It is said we are dying. It is said fruit stands, clothes racks, and suitcases split over Jesus roads. Aunt Jemima and the shopkeepers are no longer selling candles. Beggars wail all night, keeping me awake. Snakes do not cure nightmare or my illness. It is said a Muslim Chinese woman is braving Jesus. It is said an African man in a long sand-toned kaftan is loved by his exile. He loves the smell of yassa. I keep voices in my ear. Ndax dëgg nga Américain. I wish for a cry of owls, their hornless silence, their grace, a speck of evil I must embrace. their hunger for wet mud I envied. Their colorless skin mourns for breeze it knows. Barbettes carrying rice farms ask to share rice I received from a village orphanage. Wishing these birds farewell is a hard task. It is said black men in loose silk shirts right behind them is a ghost mother's sweat. How I used to adore their whistling, singing in summer dawns. Maman, je t'embrasse très fort. L'amour, mère fantôme, repousse tes bras. In my ethnic village, a tune bangs voices coming from mosque and church. In my native village, a Quran tune bangs rebels gunfire. It is a loner's sound. It is said priests are waiting for their fish. Ah, I almost forgot. The frozen feathers warm, it hooks in my poor black heart. Before I cross the sea, I smell your lovely skirt. It is said they section off sidewalks. It is said sidewalks were bare to Africans. Quand l'esprit sénégalaise frondole. Mother clutching her children. They are afraid of the sea. To drown slowly. I wait for growing sun and hide devil in my tongue. Uncle Omar Mohammed Sheikh bargain your skirt for schoolgirls begging for water to dissolve dust, bridging loss and wounds in their throats. They need blankets. Do not marry the president, I say to her. Marry the milkman. Ghost mother is not gutting vessels landscape. Hollow open fields, our nightmares blown out a passage. Wounds take flight for the bush. Echoes of snipers' bullet vanish. For a sound we can't read at dawn or in darkness of emphatic waves, so distant our youth. Each of us curves time at the border. The future limits itself to witness captive wind near village shrines. Fear braces my mouth full of owl's feathers. The village nurses and midwives came for peaceful daybreak. Safety shimmers for a hidden plan. Je suis le fils du défunt. I walk with Jesus towards Senegal, France, America, and China. For this section, the last poem I'm going to read is called Fragment. Fragment. Bilai Walla, it is not true. I can't be a jogger, but a single note, single talk, one body, bleeding in your machine, making your crime rent therapy and form. From art irrational. What does blackness have if malice, violence, horror is all you are aware of? Have I escaped being Senegalese, African, black, and colorful? Or faithful to my Jesus? You choose. What do museums have if African faces are all you are aware of, Master Thief? Have I died a black death on your boulevards? You choose. Ghost Mama said, glory in our skin.
So is it my turn? Matthias, yeah, you didn't rehearse, so I'm sure of how this works, but yeah.
I think this is really beautiful, and now it's your turn.
Okay, I'm going to mar the beauty.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and one of the things is language, which I guess we'll get to, because I was just thinking, this book has lots of notes at the end with translations, so it's harder to follow if you're just listening. So I'm not going to translate everything, but it's interesting that it's an experience quite different when you just hear it, that I think is worth noting. But I did want to just start off with the notion of trauma and tragedy, because that's at the core, obviously, of this book, and it's at the deepest, most intimate, personal level, and then stretches all across the Black world. And they kind of crisscross each other throughout the book, and it happens in pretty much all three of the poems that you read for this first section. So I was just curious if you, as much as you can or want to talk about it, sort of how that relation works, or sort of where the trauma is operating, and like just a little bit about that, because it so obviously haunts this book. So yeah, I would just like to hear more.
Right. That's a great question, Professor Brown. Oh, trauma, I think for my personal trauma, in the book is a way of returning home, right? I think the sense of being the outsider is in itself traumatic, right? You don't feel, but you feel like you don't belong. So I'm sort of, I think, right, I'm always in the third space. I'm sort of what they call, the third order, right? So that in itself, it's traumatic. So before I get out of my house, I have to, equip myself with my Senegalese devices to protect myself. That in itself, it's a trauma. But when we talk about trauma in the general sense, in the universal sense, if you want to go that way, I think when we talk about Black trauma or Blackness in general, we always want to trace Blackness with the traumatic memories, right? But there's beauty in a way in that memory, right? We shouldn't even, even for my personal trauma, in a sense, there's some poem where the trauma become really dark and very heavy, but there's in some poem where the trauma becomes sort of like nostalgia, right? You use it to recover or to return home. You use it as sort of like I don't know whether you can say a good weapon, but it's sort of like a device to protect. It's the way of, clutching what you have, right? So being Senegalese, not being able to go back sometimes, or like, not knowing your real mother, that in itself, and I think, I don't know, I think trauma always goes with you, right? Trauma never leaves you. Trauma follows you everywhere, especially if you are a Black person.
Yeah, no, and that sort of really, the double-sided nature of it really comes out, because you have like, you find beauty in America, the American grace, and you also, but you also find trauma and persecution and all these other things that are, inspired even by very contemporary events in this book. And then also at home, there's both. It's the site of a very initial trauma, it seems. We just get glimpses of it, right? Memories, very vague, not vague, very sharp details of it, but nothing that's a narrative particularly. So, but then again, like the grandma's timber jug has moments of redemption and beauty and possibility, even if it's hesitant. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So another question I had was about the structure of the letters. And this is another thing that if you're listening, you can't actually see. And I was curious to see how you were going to read the ends of the letters. Here's one that I didn't mark up quite as much. Yeah, but the letters, they're really heavy at the beginning, almost prose. And then at the end, they fragment into very different lines. I don't know how well anybody can see that, but can see how they're spaced, and you're doing a lot with the page. Yeah, Matthias has a better version for you guys. So with notable exceptions at the end, the pattern holds throughout. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you were trying to achieve with that on the page, sort of the visual element of the poetry.
I love that question because, you know, letters in their own sense, they're very intimate, right? When we think about letters, I think even when you return to the archives, I think most of the concrete and really crucial information you can find sometimes are in the letters. And here in this book, for me, the letter actually, the way it's set up in the block, it means that in that section, the speaker sort of like he's aware of everything, right? So he's conscious, is stable, right? But because of the trauma, because of the problem of language, and because of the way I think the speaker is trying to move in different languages, but also this sense of like, oh, actually, what am I doing? Because when I'm writing these stable letters where language is really stable and compact and everything is like, oh, it looks good on the page, you are also not speaking to yourself or speaking to the third reader, right? So you actually, it's a little bit, I'm playing a game here, right? But when the letter drops, it's like, okay, that's actually the real speaker speaking, right? Because language is like all over the place, you know. Syntax is like, you know, resist, and everything is resist. I think the poetic of resistance actually becomes what it is at the end of the letters, right? You actually break away from everything. Everything is chaotic. You know, you sort of like, you know, you become the crooked nails that resist everything. But when the letters start, you know, you like, you know, you pretending that, you know, you like, you know, I don't know, you playing a game with the reader. It's like, okay, this is a letter, everything is straight, everything makes sense. But then, you know, unless they flip over to the next page, they think actually everything is tight and everything is stable. But then actually you are completely lost at the end of the letter.
Okay. Should I keep asking? I don't know the timing of all this. So I mean, let's do one more and then I'll let you read it. Yeah, that seems
okay. Sounds good.
And I guess we could stay on the letters for now. And I just had a question about to whom they're addressed, because it's, you know, like you get a sense of capaciousness at the end, right? I mean, because this one is addressed to a Chinese woman and it's based on an article about Chinese xenophobia, right? And so I just like and so at the very end of that last, or that, not the last poem, but the middle poem that you read, there's, you know, there's the normal touchstones that we get throughout the book, but then with the addition of an extra space in there that I found quite interesting. And the letters are addressed kind of all over the place. And so I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what drove those decisions, and you know, sometimes they're footnoted and sometimes they're not, so it's sometimes not clear whether these are real people or somebody you have in mind and all the rest. So yeah, just a little bit about how those letters, because there are, I didn't count, but there's probably 12 or 14 letters in here, right? Only the last couple to the mother.
Right. That's a brilliant question, because the poems, all the poems are addressed to female, to you know, they're not addressed to men, they're addressed to women, right? So there's for me in my artistic work, these are ghost mothers I create. Them that they are actually ghost mothers I create. When you go to the notes, you see only a couple of them, about 3 or 4 are actually real, but the rest is sort of like the artistic juice that, you know, create them, right? So they're actually themselves are ghost mothers, but the title, you know, is always related to what's happening, the subject that's being treated in the letter. So the song we're listening to, Yande Kod, she actually gets a poem in the book. So there's a poem at the end of the book that's like Yande Kod. She's like an iconic figure in Senegal. She was Leopold Sédar Senghor's singer. And she has this really wonderful voice that every girl dreams of having. So she gets the poem, but the rest of the title, I just, I think while I was creating this project, I was thinking, actually, I'm thinking of the ghost mother, so I create ghost mothers, so ghost letters.
What's also an interesting thing with the epistolary form, which you kind of like spread out into fragmented poetry always at the end, it kind of like seems to enable you to also switch places, to kind of like not only to introduce new characters, but to kind of really put on layers of your own experience, kind of like some lines point to American experiences, the letter was building up to Senegalese myth, the milkman who is kind of like a recurring figure, the snake, and then it kind of like really suddenly feels like, well, but where are the church bells now? Are they in Senegal? Are they in St. Louis? Are they in New York? Are they pointing to Paris? What kind of like discourse is overlapping your talk? And this kind of like bricolage technique, was that there at the very beginning when you started this project, the Ghost Letters, 5 or 6 years ago?
Yes. The bricolage was there, but it was not very crystallized, right? So when we think about bricolage, you return to your older work and try to put them together, but you don't try to do bricolage in the present, right? You go back to the past and create it together. But what inspired the bricolage project, I thought, is the sense of freedom, right? It's a weapon of freedom where like you are free on the page in itself. And there's a lot of writers who are doing this, right? And actually, as you know, bricolage in itself, it's like there's a poetic of bricolage, right? So you take all the memories you have and turn it into something.
No, I was immediately when we started talking about your poems and you showed me the first ones, we were asking everyone to write to make a map on their current projects, and this was what you were coming up with.
Wow.
Really drawing a tree, kind of like, and you can actually kind of like really turn it from upside.
Oh my God, I can't believe you still have that.
I loved it when the book now came out. I really tried to trace what you have written down here, and authors, like Edouard Glissant. I was immediately thinking of him when I saw your work. Rilke, Borwin, but also themes. And everything seems to come together. Milkman, snake, everything was here already, and you even gave yourself a time frame where you might be in 1 year. And now I'm so happy to see how this tree of ideas really became something completely different. And the ideas many people were already writing about, that you create a surrealist landscape of different layers, an inner landscape of diaspora, of exile, but as you also pointed to, as of beauty, which I really see, just like how you phrase it. And so this reading is so beautiful that we can really feel the power of also the voice, which holds it together. When do you know when a poem of yours is finished?
That's a great question. The poem never finishes because later in the next section, I'm going to read one of the poems, which is Exile to Ghost Mother's Exile. No, Prologue to a Ghost Mother's Exile Note, Volume 1. So those poems are finished, but you always return to the poem, right? Unless, for me, I think this might be troubling, but I'll say it. For me, unless the publisher say, this is my deadline, give me the work, the poem never finishes. So I think I was not in trouble, but when I was returning the edits, I keep changing things because everything was speaking to me in that same poem. So the poems never finishes, I think. For me, at least.
So I think this is a perfect moment. I think, Dillon, if we want to hear some more poems and then some more questions, and the poems never are silent. They kind of like speak back. So please give us 3 more.
Okay. Prologue to A Ghost Mother's Exiled Note, Volume 1. What happens to a refugee's dream when a girl's dream is broken and her sister has gone missing for months and years? Does it snap like Freddy's spine inside the emperor's van? Does it bloom like ancient rosemary near the Mississippi River? Does it snap like George's neck? Underneath Officer X and his Americanized knee, pinned between Ghost Mother and Jesus Cross against Americanized violence. It died like a prisoner's spine in a torture chamber in Senegal, a holy bridge, and then faces muzzled in a water bucket for the walls, off the walls. Je meurs, je meurs, je meurs, Ghost Mother said. Owls and vultures witness Officer X nags her, forcing expired pills in her broken throat, terminal wounds, flower under the bridge of her long and rosy tongue. It is said sour milk she used to fight insomnia. It is said cracks on the walls she used as a platform, clapping, laughing at ghosts and ruin results. She restrained her pain, though fly and spider gamble the clear-cut faith to claim territory. For conquering oozing a bloody border in their own isolation. It is said our broken dreams sagged and they are ghostly hanging between white walls in our gorgeous America. And for our scented France, sans des vautours pour expulser le mal. This poem is called The Meaning of Restrained Revenge. The meaning of restrained revenge. Revenge is not politics, revenge is art. To be a chunk of the civilized tribes, you candidly recalled ways your Black body have been burned long ago. Yoke of selfhood is a way of accepting a Black death. Appearance branded by the fact that you were born. Revenge is not politics, revenge is art. Although not all in the word privilege, there is freedom, right? Finally, and even if you could give everything, our everything, revenge is not politics, revenge is art. Don't you love history, Holocaust, and slavery? You create dangerously to sever the skin. I'm a big Black dude, Officer X said before he ruptures my privacy. Revenge is not politics. Revenge is art. You don't peel ripe mango skin. You remove the dark ball of your being to numb your body from your worries. Cassava garden, vultures cleaning after the dead, a native tongue. Ah, la conscience de ma race, France, n'oublie pas les 6 de Basse Pointe. It's too bad, America, We like it very much. In here, we are staying. This is a letter I would read. It's called Dear Mama. Dear Mama, vultures came to witness Bugurup, my body a polished digester. We danced with Jesus, slaves, our tribe, the sacred songs, the exile. My body is where pride meets winter's grief. My body is a village where it once rained mud. My body is where a little blind boy was trapped. My body is a burning shed while you were out begging for dirt, begging for milk and a soccer ball, begging for papers, begging for mud from the Nile, begging for candles and challah bread, begging for a lawyer in Memphis, Tennessee. My body witnessed a public disagreement no one had ever seen. It is said nothing is sacred any longer and nothing is appropriate for a body anymore. My body told the Imam, my body and the dead body washer are not from the same faith. Mama, bring me chebujan ak chakri. Mama, call for the prayer. Mama can't call for the prayer. I'm begging for a judge, but Mama says, I'm alive in my body. Mama says, I'm Black, alive, and looking back at Officer X in mud. Then vultures came running. My tongue is licking a prophet's sweat to heal the chameleon. My body was sharpened on the Quranic surface. My body was sharpened on the Quran surface. Mama can call for the prayer. Mustafa, the herdsman, is not coming for tonight's nafila at the mosque. My body climbed up into the baobab tree to keep owls, vultures, and snakes company. Mama saw the Imam heading for the Casamas River, carrying a rope and a small chair. Mama called for the prayer before Jesus. Jesus came for mud. Jesus came for Ghost Mama and Mustafa.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So I do want to ask a little bit about language, because I think Matthias summed it up really nicely in his first, I mean, maybe in his introduction, I think, but it really does express your own sort of multifaceted existence and experience. And it's very hard to, you know, like, well, here's one thing. I mean, I'll just say this in passing. I found it odd as a post-colonial scholar that the Wolof and the Arabic was all translated in the back for the most part, but the French was not, which I find quite interesting. So you don't have to talk about that, but I just note it. And then I really wanted to ask though, if there's so it seemed to me that there were, I mean, there are phrases that echo throughout, right? One of the most haunting ones is in French, saying, I am the son of the deceased. And it appears many, many times at different moments. And it's, you know, it's sort of still, I'm not going to butcher it in my English pronunciation, but it's really powerful. And then there's lots of other phrases, many of them in French, but also the Arabic, you know, God willing, and I swear, those versions, you know, the translated versions of that. And I was just curious if there was, is there a motif that you associate with each language? Is it, you know, like, so that's just it's a big question, and you can just answer it any way you want, but how you envision the different languages interacting together, because they really do appear, you know, intermingled all the time, but then in repetition, right? And kind of this chanting quality that happens over time. They build up, and you know, like I know some Arabic now after reading this book, not much, but you know, like those phrases, they keep echoing. So I was just curious how you approached when to render things in which language, and why. Yeah.
But I think the why is big, right? The why is what happened when what happened to a piece of text or a piece of book when a bunch of languages meet together, right? What happened in a piece of poem when three languages meet together, right? Do we sort of like pin that poem and said, okay, it fits into these different worlds, or we just say, no, this is an English poem, this is an American poem, this is actually a Western poem. So I think to shake that boundary and basically start a conversation, right? What happened when you take, I don't know, a text that's written in English and you have Quran there, you have, I don't know, English there, or you have the Imam there, the Rabbi there, the church there, you know? What does it do to language, right? Who are we to say, okay, so this is an American poetry book, so you're not supposed to put the Quran there, or you're not supposed to translate the Quran, or why the English is the dominant language too becomes like the real question, right? But I think the multiple languages for me has always been this artistic, I think, search that I'm doing, right? The way to reach out to my culture is through the Wolof, right? The way to reach out to my Senegalese background is the Wolof, right? The way to reach out to my French background is the French here. Although the French is like, comes in and out, right? But I think basically what I'm trying to do with language is start a conversation. This is actually possible, right? We can write a poem and have a bunch of languages in it. You can, you know, I think it's interesting, and I think beauty become the other thing, right? I think the way the languages look on their, I think in the letters, the way they look, they're beautiful, you know, where the English is like straight dominant, and then you have these other roots or threads of other languages come in together, right? It's like, but also I think to directly answer the question is like, I'm interested into sound and how the reader feels thing, right? I think in the letters, an English ear would read the line, and as soon as they bump into a Wolof line, they stop right away, because the English ear is a very fine ear, right? It stops, you know. And I think it's another way of getting closer to the reader, because when they stop and they don't understand that sentence that says something in Wolof, there's no footnote. There's nothing to explain that line. They have to stop and then go back to the notes. So I think it's a really interesting and very profound connection with the reader. I don't know. I think some of the reader, hopefully they appreciate the notes.
Yeah, well, I certainly did for the wall. No question about it. It helps, because yes, I have no grasp of wall, despite anything. Okay, and then I also wanted to ask about religion, and then you just talked about it a little bit, and it's you know, there's a church and a mosque everywhere. You know, there's an imam and Jesus. They're associated with different characters that appear consistently. And then at the very end, in a poem you're going to read, comes the rabbi. And so I really was interested in the sort of, you know, the dynamic of the two that seem to dominate everything of the past for the most part, right? And then the rabbi somehow seems to signal at the end a different movement forward. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how the religion factors in, and you know, in the imagery and in your thinking of how the poems are working all together.
No, that's an excellent question, because I'm personally, so my real dad is Muslim, and my real mom is Catholic. I'm adopted by a Jewish mother. I think she's somewhere there listening. I've never been Bat Mitzvah, but I've attended one, and I think, again, that idea of starting a conversation, right, with all this, right, you know, we live in a very difficult and very sad world, we don't often listen to religious leaders, but it wouldn't be beautiful if we have the rabbi and the imam and the priests often meet and discuss even politics, right? I think their sense of understanding of the world could help us move forward, and that's what I'm trying to do with the rabbi coming in the end. I listened to him, right, and the way he curses American violence, right. In an interesting way, though, when we think of religion, again, trauma, religion has done awful things, but also people are afraid of religion because of certain beliefs, right? But we can see beauty in religion, even though I'm not religious. I see beauty in religion. I think that's where the poetry actually becomes really useful for me. I don't write poetry because it's cool. I write poetry to sort of like reach out to my inner self, to discover myself. And this way, I think poetry become my religion, right? Because I get to have a platform where I can do whatever I want.
I mean, this kind of like ties into what I was thinking about. If we take Edouard Glissant's kind of like positive attitude towards a Creolic worldview, where it doesn't mean that, mixture or acceptance of differences is anything bad or anything that has to be prevented, but on the contrary, that it created jazz, that it created great poetry, that the confluence of languages could create new possibilities for identity. Would that also be your poetics?
Right, that's a wonderful question. Again, I think the idea of being universal and belonging to the Black diaspora is really important, right? But again, we have to look at beauty, right, in it. Otherwise, it becomes sort of like this really difficult thing, right? So my poetics, I think, it's not the poetics of beauties, but the poetics of like belonging, the poetics of universality, right? So even though I'm questioning my personal identity constantly. Even when I leave my house, there's a certain way I'm thinking, oh, what should I dress? Am I going to campus? Am I going to dress a certain way to feel a certain way? That all that is part of the poetics. Like, oh, am I just going to hang out with my friends where I'm free? I can wear wherever I want to wear, or I can leave my hair the way I want to leave it. But I think to concretely answer your question, my poetics, I think it wants to belong. My poetics, it's freedom, right? It's a way of expressing the self, a way of starting conversation.
So I'm not the master of ceremonies, but it seems like, should we move to the?
Yeah, we're close.
We want to keep the time.
And so maybe you allow me one last question. Kind of like, in which languages do you dream?
I dreamed in Wolof yesterday. I dream in French. I dream in all of them. I don't know. I don't dream in Arabic yet, but I dream in Wolof, English, and French.
And definitely, we are ready now to hear another beautiful and haunting poem, and this is what we close off with.
Okay. So this is going to be the last poem. It's the last poem in the book. This is called Dear Mama. It is said you nurture dusk in the holy desert, Alhamdulillah. It is said you bless me with vultures and hyenas, Alhamdulillah. It is said that you nurture cassava garden and mud, Alhamdulillah. You said we do not deceive, dying, even restrain at high sea. Mama, you said dying like a ghost. It was restrained for the blessed crowd to witness. The raven and the vulture, the camel and the donkey, fairness and harmony in our village, at the mosque and in church. It is said you nurture hyena bones, Alhamdulillah. It is said you nurture Senegalese owls and their journey at night. Don't tell them founding fathers details of black feathers in the middle of a jungle. Milkman said vultures and his clients don't go to prison. Milkman said his son Yara will not beat his case. Because vultures came for food and red meat, everyone desires absence. Uncle Omar Muhammad Sheikh said, Alhamdulillah, you are linking to the universal. Can you imagine Officer X protecting Kumpo and Kankuran? Bilai Wallah, can you imagine Officer X protecting Yara? Ghost's mother said, Judge, my boy, he did not do it. Even if a price on our heads, it is said it was important for Yara case. When he asked where was his judge, each body is still traveling, broken to black and dying tolerantly. Coffin maker said, Inshallah, hyena, vultures, owls, and his clients would never do a double homicide. The unknown for the end of hunger. Shrine keeper said, don't tell them founding fathers how we nurture vultures, how we care for mud and hunger. You said, even if restrained alive and dying a black death, you said, we are not born in the USA. You said, we come to the USA. You said, we become the USA. You said, we are the USA. You said, Judge, my boy, he did not do it. A scene, vultures in mud, a dream, nurses and their hunger, restrained alive and dying a black death. Americanized for violence, of course, we learn it in the Atlantic. Vultures in the abattoir, decomposing our dreams. History and milk about a woman, a black woman, former lover, dust in the holy desert, blood hung in flowers and only in destroyed cities. About a French woman, Ghost Mama said, it is Passover. We have wine and matzah, sacred ghosts in the synagogue, drunk from honey. We wait for coffin maker and the rabbi to bless us. The rabbi came with challah bread. Ghost Mama gone, we lit candles to read our wounds. The rabbi came during Rosh Hashanah to bless us. From the dream, we hunger ourselves in the mare. The rabbi came to hunger with us before we enter Place des Vosges after prayer hour. Hunger ripens in America, but the rabbi bless us. His work is the holiest. He gave me ghosts and a hunter's gift. My God, the rabbi's gifts. Watching over us, he cursed American violence. The evening he came to lit the menorah with us. Prayers the rabbi gave to us. Rabbi came bearing gifts, latkes, sour cream, and applesauce from the Holy Land. Rethinking Hanukkah through the rabbi is a blessing. My limbs swung inside my dark skin. Ghost Mama stooped at the door to pray for my holy body to return home safely. Ghost Mama kneel near Jesus to beg for my safe return. Ghost Mama was pleading to the judge when her tears and her sweaty hands sealed at a Jesus cross. Ghost Mama said, American violence is a learned violence. It is the American way. Jesus' milk is drip for my departure. My arrival will be a beginning. My arrival is a beginning. I came with blessing, mud, black blood, graces as a slave. You said, Surat Fatia, never, never, never tell them cold founding fathers where we buried nightmares and hyena bones in the cassava garden and how I live up to absurd. The herdsman and his gifts everywhere in my country of birth, you said a hunter is black. I would never tell them founding father. I would never tell them this story late from my prayers, but you said I have Suratul Balad and Suratul Falak. I'm amazed to discover Officer X is in my nightmares, but then this awful nightmares, I reimagine my blackness, my slaveness, decolonizing Officer X, working in the farm, housekeepers, papers given the Italian way, oozing for the cold weather, alcohol clots, the devil in my hospital bed, the Pope came for slave reason. I'm amazed to discover that you have gone and Jesus came, but that from the cassava garden, from the exact spot of the burial, in the cassava garden, I could hear words you whispered. I could hear you praise the Lord, the prayers you ask Jesus, the prayers you ask Allah, the prayers you ask Jesus. Adieu. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Baba, thank you so much. Dillon Brown, Dillon, wonderful. For both of you, thank you so much for this conversation. Walter is sending once more a link to our after party, our reception, where you can ask Baba questions. We will also hang around, Dillon and I, and Walter as well. Adieu from time to time is just an invitation. One invitation is to really buy ghost letters and to read ghost letters, and the other one is to come back to the International Writer Series on the 10th of March for Olivia Lott's brilliant translation. See you all.
All right, see you in a minute.
Yeah, so we're going on a different Zoom. Yeah.
We are, right?